Heyo! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Medtech Business Academy, sponsored by your Medtech experts. My name is Skender Daerti, and I'm proud to be joined today by my co-hosts, Barbara Strain, Tom Hickey, and Mike Sperduti. We're excited to have this kind of get end of year 2024, heading into 2025 type of approach, the thing that kind of everybody does. Why wouldn't we do it too? But we're going to do it with a better twist. We're going to give you some more information as to what you need to know for 2025, because there's a lot, right? And we were talking about this in pre-production from the context of, it feels like every year since basically 2020, we leave the year being like, oh, this is craziness. Everything is going to change. Everything is so different. And is this any different from that? Is this still as crazy? Is it going to be markedly different? We had this thing in the United States, at least, called an election. And we're not going to get political about it. It's only the context of that is going to have some ramifications in ways that people may not be thinking. So if this discussion, as we're recording it right now in early December, is meant to be a precursor to, hey, how about if this happens? How about if that happens? Or how about if none of it happens, right? What should you be thinking about? What do you need to do to get yourselves ready? That's what we're here for as the Medtech experts. So with that, welcome to the Medtech Business Academy. So we're recording this early December, 2024, getting ready for the calendar flip. Let me just ask a simple question. Is this year's calendar flip on December 31 to January 1, 12:01 a.m., is it the same as every other year, or is this different? Tom, what do you think?
I think, it really, the answer to that question depends on the perspective of what type of organization you're aligned with, right? If you're a entrepreneurial company and you're sourcing all your products in the US, it might not even be a blip on the radar. If you're a global organization, right, and you're, chief revenue officer or director of supply chain for a global organization, it could have big ramifications, right? So I think it just kind of depends on where the particular listener is coming from, right? Because we talked about things like tariffs, in our pre-production, things about advertising, right? So there's all kinds of moving parts. So I think, like a lot of things, it just depends on your perspective and what you're dealing with today.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think?
So, every year we do this, and every year I have the same thought. And that is, no, nothing's different. It's the same thing. It's, yes, the new year is going to be different. Of course it is. Tomorrow is going to be different. Things are changing at the speed of light, and the change gets faster and faster. So the answer is, of course, we have to adapt and change. And to Tom's point, with supply chain, obviously with Trump now in as the president, China, yeah, you probably want to be thinking about, if you're manufacturing in China, which I was manufacturing in China back when Trump first took presidency, his first term, and I had to move manufacturing from China to India because I got hit with that 20% tax, and I couldn't pass that on to my customers. So I think you have to be, just like every other year, you have to be looking at the political landscape. You have to be looking at what countries you're looking to either market to or buy from, and see how this new administration is going to impact that, and just adapt like we always have to do. We have to just look at what's out there, look at the field, and then adapt our strategy to the way the offense or defense is playing, number one. Number two, go back to what's the same. What's the same? No matter who's the president, no matter what the economy is, no matter what the tariffs are, you have to sell. So what does your sales process look like? What does your staff look like? What are the things that you should be doing every single day? You need to just sharpen that sword. So I think it's, go back to fundamentals and get up to speed on virtual selling and inside sales, and master those things that we know we have to do relative to sales and marketing today. That has changed, but just now we have to continue to get better at that, as well as adapt to the other issues and markets that you want to get into.
Great points, Mike. I want to put a pin in that tariff thing for a second, but I want to give Barbara, do you think January 1st is the same or different?
It's both. How
Okay.
about that? I'll be one of those left and right people. The thing of it is if you have been listening to us all year, we've been giving you those nuggets in our academy that you need to go back to, playbooks and things. And what did I do? What happened and what was my reaction? So I'm one of those start doing, keep doing, stop doing sort of review that you need to do, but you need to keep up to date on the bouncing ball that's going to start down the court that January 6th, sort of, or 20th, whenever the inauguration and all that stuff is, but the day one.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Barbara a question, and just from the standpoint of, if you're listening to this and you're, a director of supply chain, vice president of supply chain, something like that in a major healthcare system, looking at all of this from that perspective, are those folks getting a little heartburn with all the potential change out there?
Yeah, it's no different than it was in the 2020, 2021. It's a little relaxed, but you are going to probably pay more. Budgets are tight, and senior leadership are saying, you've got to do better. You got to negotiate or whatever. You're beyond sometimes now that negotiation phase, and you're really in, what can I really do that I can control versus things I can't control, but what can I do on the things I can control? There's AI, automation, a variety of things that if you didn't do it before or you didn't get money to do it, that's where you need to place the money and to streamline and take waste out of stuff.
Yeah, I think from a medtech perspective, you have to be more hyper attuned to what's happening with the macro provider environment. Macro economy aside for a second, right? We said we put a pin in that tariff thing because that's going to be a major thing for our industry and the entire industry, whether that gets enacted January 21 or it doesn't get enacted at all, right? There's some debate as to what's going to happen there, and we all have to be prepared for it. But I just read an article and I was surprised. 3 major physician staffing firms have closed down in the last year, right? Staffing firms, right? And the reason why is the hospitals have adapted in a way that have said, hey, maybe we'll take advantage of this gig economy. Maybe using AI allows us to look at our caseload more efficiently and effectively, where we don't have to pay these exorbitant staffing firm rates anymore, and we can create these things. Does staffing matter to medtech in a direct way? In an indirect way, it does. But in a direct way, if you don't pay attention to those macroeconomic aspects of the provider, where they're saying, hey, almost 70% of every dollar we spend right now is allocated towards labor. And now you're going to tell me that we might see a 20% uptick in our supply cost? You have to enter this January 21, 25, this 25 year as saying, I better be prepared starting by March, if not sooner, to say, what is my strategy going to be? Because there's going to be significant pushback. They're making adaptations. They're getting prepared, and they're not just going to accept the same old, same old. That's my thoughts.
So, Skender, I want to just amplify what you're saying, because this is what I'm seeing. Everybody knows that there's a huge labor shortage of clinical labor out there. And so now, so what is the answer? The answer is robots, and the answer is virtual reality. And so right now, I am working on pharmacy robots, which is basically getting rid of pharmacists having to dispense pills. Now, this technology's been around a long time for the bigger companies, but now, like I'm representing McKesson, what we're doing there is we are now catering to the smaller pharmacies. So now think about it. If you're in the supply business and you're making supplies for that pharmacist, the gowns, the booties, the gloves, the transfer devices, whatever you're doing, and that's going to be automated, Well, all those supplies are going to go down in terms of their needs. So I'm seeing a big uptick in robotics. I'm also representing a company right now that's doing VR testing for optometrists, where they do all those eye tests that I wear glasses, and Barbara, you do too. I mean, they're a pain in the ass. Those tests are just not fun because you got to get your eyes right and what have you. And this technology you just put on your eyes and it will do all the testing for you. There's no subjectivity like there is with the other tests. And also, you're not relying on unskilled labor or barely skilled labor to do those prep tests for the doctor. So again, I think if you're in this business of healthcare and wellness, I think technology, if you're not playing a technology game, you're in trouble.
Well, you see, Mike, that's the thing. And I think this is going to be a marked year for this. When we talk about medtech, we talk about the devices our people use on patients. Where I think 2025 is going to be a big jump is the concept of technology being used in procedural workflow, right? We're going to see a massive jump, whether it be automations and AI, robots, whatever it may be. I think that's going to be one of the most disruptive parts of this year, is actually seeing that tech applied to workflow, to operations, right? That's a big difference. What do you think, Tom?
I totally agree. With I'm seeing and talking to a lot of people looking at AI and machine learning, right, and taking that data, finding better ways. Everything from patient selection to looking at drug discovery. Right, there's a lot of AI going on in analysis of various molecules and chemicals in the whole drug discovery area. So it's being attached everywhere. And if you're not looking at that in your business, even if it's the most benign sort of business, if you're making small little gauze patches or something, you've got to be looking at how can you use this to create those efficiencies and outcomes. Because to Mike's point, the providers are looking at this for procedural selection, right? How do we do this? What are our best avenues? And you'll see inventory levels dropping because we'll have the predictive and analytics to know what we need to have. So it's going to, the waves are going to rivet through the whole industry, and I think you need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, well, I have a question for you. And so hang on to your thought, and then you can expand upon it, because this is really towards you. Because here's another client that I'm working with that, they have these disposables that are traditional like diapers, and they're putting in chips into these diapers. So basically you can let people know, when they should be changed, when they shouldn't be changed. So now the diaper cost obviously is going to be a lot higher than the basic diaper. But the overall value is you're going to be reducing a lot of different problems and nursing time and things of that nature. How are the valuation committees going to start looking at commodity-based technology like this?
Well, we've had peppers of this all the way through our last 10 years. And somebody would come up with the better mousetrap, or in your case, the better diaper and things. You just really have to look at that entire downstream. Are people actually going to wait until they get a signal, or is it just part of their normal workarounds, right? So everybody would have to change what they're doing. And so having some real world experience or some very good data. And what we're looking for today is the data that works in the manner that it's said, and that people are actually not just doing it because it's part of a study and they're getting those effects. It's really putting it into normal use. And what is that expense, and what does that really look like? And am I saving what they're telling me? So that when you're doing your nursing or your respiratory therapy or whatever it is that you're looking at, is that it's really helping you in ways that the staffing you do have can work better on a lot more patients, because now you've taken some of that rote stuff out of it.
I want to bring everybody back to the idea of let's place ourselves back in 1890. Okay. There was a blacksmith, there was a tanner. Okay. There was probably a butcher. These were vital, vital positions in a community, right? You couldn't have a community without those. Okay. Does anybody know a blacksmith?
Well, I live in horse country, so yeah, we've got
you know a blacksmith. Yes. Does anybody? You probably know a tanner too. So let's go to Long Island.
Yeah,
Mike, you know a blacksmith.
Absolutely not.
You know, and do you know a tanner?
Nope.
Right. And when you think about how consequential those positions were to life at that time, right? Now let's flash forward about 140 years from when I stated, okay, those are obsolete. Okay. It didn't take 140 years for those to go obsolete. It took a matter of years and decades for them to become obsolete, right? All it took was for Henry Ford to automate the making of the car. And then the blacksmith position just kind of went by the wayside, right? These are the things that when we talk about turning the calendar and incorporation of technologies, not just for how do I make the next great MRI machine, but how do I make that MRI machine that creates less labor requirement to operate it, to do more procedures, right? That's the disruptors that our industry needs to be inventing and thinking of, because that's what our customers are looking for. And if we're generally not prepared for that, there's going to be a lot of blacksmiths and tanners from our industry in 2030. They're going to say, I remember when.
Yep.
And I think the impact on a lot of what's going to happen, right? No matter what we're thinking about, if it's, tariffs or if it's, FDA authorizations, it's what the device manufacturers have to be thinking is getting the information so we can help all of these providers work at the top of their licensure, right? If it's a chip in your diapers, right, that's going to help, notify that, we're going to have somebody come in and change it so we don't start getting skin breakdown. That's going to require a nurse, and it's going to require a surgeon to fix the wound, all those types of things. And being able to take that value proposition and relate it to those staffing efficiencies and working at the top of your licensure.
Yeah, I was telling just somebody yesterday is we can't just look at the cost of the procedure and now you're going to erode, your revenue from that or whatever. You have to look at the long game is what is it really going to gain me? I'm going to save by people not having to come back into the hospital or stay longer in a hospital or whatever the case is. You can have all the scenarios possible. So I think paying attention, but if you're not there already, now's the time to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I can tell you, we work with a lot of fairly large strategics and just having some conversations with them as they start to look at the 2025 landscape. And the expectation is money's going to free up a little bit more. There's probably going to be a lot more M&A activity. Hopefully rates come down. We don't know, right? Tariffs could have an impact on inflation. We'll see how that works out. But that's the general consensus. Rates are going to come down. Money will be more accessible. The expectation is there will be a little bit more M&A activity as a result of that. One thing that I'm hearing from strategics is they are evaluating their portfolio of how they invest and look at companies. Okay. They no longer are looking at the company and do they have a great product and does the product create a good outcome? They're also looking at what does it take to create adoption for that product. Okay. It's a whole new mindset. Companies have lost money buying great technologies only to find out, oh my God, we sell it. Yeah, it's great. We all think of that clinical commodity. Hospital uses 1,000 of them a day. That's great. 1,000 times X dollars times all this. We do all that. But then they find out it costs 70 cents of every dollar to get that adopted, right? Forget your gross costs on that. So they're starting to look away from some of those high clinical commodity products because they're like, how do I get this? How do I get people to adopt it? It's great. What you're telling me is a great disruptive story and it impacts patient care. But if I've got to send 10 people there every month to go and get people to use this, It's not worth my aggravation anymore. So companies have to start thinking, whether if you're one of our small customers or one of our smaller listeners, you better have your ducks in a row if you think that just because of the hopefully free money of 2025 is going to come back. If you don't have an answer for how you're going to get adoption of your technology in that process, and that's the same thing even for providers. The providers are asking the same thing. Cool technology. How are you going to get my people to use it?
I think that's a great point, Skender, because it's the most overlooked part. It's the most overlooked cost is the switching cost. There's always a cost of going from A to B.
Yep.
And the question is the cost still in line with the return that you're going to get once you factor that in? And I don't think, and Barbara, you could probably comment on this, I don't think people spend nearly enough time talking about the ease of conversion, because that's the way it has to be in order for them to convert.
Yeah, and we do the one respiratory therapist said to me early in my value analysis career, there's such a cost to these conversions that we're just not looking at cost savings. We're looking at a variety of things. So value analysis does all of that work where you're looking at everything. So it's a total return on investment. So you're right on with that, is that it's not easy, even if it's so close to the same product. You've got to set up distributor, you've got to set up shelving, you've got to change your ERP. It's a variety of things. And some people say then you've got to train differently because it has one different thing. But when it tries to get sold to put people up, just like it. So no problem.
What about the clinical? Like that, the business stuff is tough, but the clinical stuff is even harder. If a nurse is used to putting in a PICC line a certain way, or a doctor's used to doing a procedure a certain way, and now it's a true change in behavior. Behavior.
I had a surgeon tell me once I'd have to use left-handed, not right-handed, and I'm right-handed. Right. And I go, well, that's a perfectly good answer.
Exactly right.
I'm living that dream right now because many of you know I've got a client that has a new way of doing infant spinal taps, lumbar punctures, right? And providers will look at this and just intuitively go, this is a better way to do it, right? But it's taken so far 2 years to get into several children's hospitals, but we've just scratched the surface. So, but it's that same story, right? And it's outlining that value proposition and saying, hey, if we can improve this, what does this really mean? But to the point, I had a conversation just today going with a physician educator at a very large facility in the Midwest. And she said, well, what if I train my residents on how to use this and they go to a place that doesn't have it? Right? So it's one of those things you've got to, how do you manage that, especially if you're a smaller company?
But then I shake my head and say, so you're going to put a patient at risk because the resident might go someplace else.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
People always say, Barbara, you're just too logical. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's aspects to that, right? We always forget about the human dynamic. And so obviously everybody knows in my company, we deal with a lot of clinicians. That's why we're the clinician exchange. But along those lines, we were talking to a group of nurses recently and we asked them, and it was a focus group, and they were very bought into this product, loved it. When everything was done and said, we said, okay, would you move on it? They go, I would, but not right now. And so we're like, okay, well, you really liked it. You thought it was disruptive. And their commentary was, our ratios have gone like this. Okay. So I might have been watching over 5 ICU patients previously. Sometimes I'm up to 8, 9. Okay. Myself. If you throw any wrinkle, right? Any wrinkle, it's going to set me off. Okay. The simplest wrinkle. It doesn't matter what. I need to be able to go into 8 rooms and just look at that room and see stasis of some sort. And if there's one thing that doesn't comply, just that little thing could set me off. And it's one of those things we always forget, that human dynamic here, right? We talk about great outcomes. That's great. We talk about cost savings. That's great. but we miss out on that operational human value aspect. And I think in 2025, Mike, you set this off. It's going to be the incorporation of the technology in the operational world. And if we as an industry aren't ready for that, it's going to be a problem, Tom.
Yeah, there's another wrinkle in this too, that you generated a thought in my head, and Mike, you'll love this too, because if you're that global company, right, and you're trying to create this change, but you have to wait for the facilities to be ready for it, right? How do you support a sales team? Right, you can't have 100 or 150 direct sales reps knocking on that door every time. And for me, many of you know my expertise is I help small to mid-sized companies put together, independent sales teams, whether they're, specialty distributors or independent reps. And I know Mike is really strong in telemarketing and support activities that way. And I think my phone is ringing off the hook these days with international companies going, how do we do this, right? Because we can't afford to have 100 people out there, trying to, get into these centers or waiting and doing all these things to try to support. So there's a lot of efficiencies on that sales and marketing end that one has to think about. I've never been busier with helping companies develop sales strategies in this type of environment. Mike, how about you?
We're seeing the same thing, and especially with the shift towards virtual selling. Mm-hmm. I think everybody has finally, figured out the fact that we have to do it. And so now it's like anything else. Now you have to do it. And so then people start making every basic mistake in the world because you're new at it. So typically, if you want to do like inside sales, what do? You start taking your customer service team and you start having them start doing outbound because they're not busy enough during certain times of the day, which logically makes sense because you want to maximize their time working. But then you realize that these people are nurturers. They love serving the customer, but to do outbound and to really, that the skill set that's necessary to take a phone number and turn that into revenue is a tremendous skill set. And so inside sales, when people say I'm an inside salesperson, chances are they're a script reader, right? Whereas what you really need is an inside sales master, just like you have in the outside sales world, where, that person can build rapport, that person can control a room, that person can has all the skills in terms of identifying unmet needs and wants, and doing the things that you need to do. So what we're seeing is everybody now realizing, okay, we need to do this, but we suck at it, and now we have to elevate the game.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott Alexander and I a couple of weeks ago did a podcast on just this. Was the idea of we think the industry has to embrace more fractionalization of the labor, right? I just talked about it with the providers. They're starting to go fractional, right? Mm-hmm. They're recognizing it. If we as an industry are, because you hear it sometimes, you're like, Tom, I'm sure you hear, I need a sales rep that that I own, is mine and is W-2 and does all this thing and needs to have it. And same thing on your side, Mike. Inside sales has to be inside. It's not an economy of scale in today's world anymore. You have to embrace fractionalization.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Agreed. I think, I've always lived with the premise, figure out what you do best and outsource the rest. Right. Yep. Find people, because you should just stay within your competencies. So many people are just great at manufacturing. They make incredible products. Well, then surround yourself with people that are not good at making products, but are great at building relationships or know how to build relationships, or they're great at marketing. So I'm with you. And the other thing is, because in most of our businesses, we outsource almost everything except for what we do best, which is the inside sales world, and then the technology or innovation that we manufacture. Everything else, we leave to experts.
Yep, absolutely. Love it. So with that, I think that's a great way to kind of bring us home here in this episode of talking about the 2025. And I think we've just, I think there's so much that's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. The pace of life is going to happen faster than ever. So what's the thing that you want to leave the audience with entering 2025, Barbara?
So I've been thinking about this as we've been talking, and there was something that one of you said that that talk about what you can really do in things. Whether or not these pressures come to fruition, we need to think about the human condition. We need to think about the patients, and don't say, well, I can, do pricing and all this sort of thing. Let's get smarter about how we do healthcare and get people actually healthy and to well care. So these pressures may come, they may not, but let's, act like they are.
Love it. Tom, how about you?
I think this might be the year of the chameleon, where so much change is going out there and you just got to adapt with it, right? And we just don't know what's going to happen, right? We've got this whole, Doge going on. We've got tariffs going on. We've got, government is going to cut itself in half. Who knows what this is going to, be like? And we as medtech executives just have to be ready to adapt in whatever comes our way.
Yeah. Mike?
So I'll just stick to the sales game, and I will say I think 2025 is going to be the year of the MedTech SEAL. And what I mean by that is, if everybody knows the Navy SEALs, right, they are incredibly devastating and lethal in 3 different environments, right? The sea, air, and land. That's where the acronym SEAL comes from. And I think the rep in 2025 that masters the telephone, that masters technology, and masters face-to-face, so the organization that does is going to clean up in 25, because you need those 3 competencies, and that's what sales is now about.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. My parting thoughts are, again, talking about embrace fractionalization, embrace new, right? We've all got to get away from this is the way we've always done it. Every year that we keep saying that, every year we go farther apart from our customer, okay? Because these legacy institutions, these legacy providers are starting to realize they can't always do it the same way, right? It doesn't matter whether, there's talk in the policy of putting more emphasis towards primary care and de-emphasizing some of the specialists. But what kind of rancor is that going to create, okay? But if we as an industry aren't prepared to adapt with our customers, Tom, you said it best, right? We have to, and a lot of times we have to lead our customers through that adaptation process, okay? So be a leader, be on the forefront of knowing, educate yourselves, and just be intelligent about what may come, because your customers are going to have, in a period of constant change, everybody has more questions than they have answers. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us again. Appreciate everybody for a very successful 2024. We hope that everybody's holiday wishes and New Year's wishes come to full fruition. 2025 is undoubtedly going to be a very exciting year. The Medtech experts are here to support you. Feel free to reach out to Mike, Barbara, Tom, or I. Anytime you have any questions, we're always here. And with that, we appreciate everybody. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.